The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the show. I'm the one they call Shayn, as always, and today for you guys, I have a very special installment of Inquiries of Our Reality. Today for you guys, I have somebody that actually inspired me to start diving into a lot of this cryptid stuff that I do, and I know a lot of people that I've had come on the show, they always talk about how they are inspired by specific books or specific movies when they were a kid, but today, being somebody from Michigan, I really dove into the Michigan Chiller books. They were some of the very first chapter books that I had read as a kid, and of course all of them dived into different types of monsters and creatures, and they all connected with the local cities, of course, in Michigan. So today is a show that I never actually thought would happen, but fortunately I had the luck of getting a hold of this guy and getting him to come on and share his backstory on why he writes this book. And unlike some episodes of Inquiries of Our Reality, this one will be completely family friendly, so if anybody wants to listen to it with any age of kids, you guys are more than welcome to do it. Today's guest definitely has a lot of inspiring words for young writers and even adults that are trying to write, so I definitely think you guys are going to enjoy this episode, especially if you're a Michigan local and you guys dived into these books as kids. But before we get into this fascinating episode today, we of course have to do news and updates and run through the front of house stuff. I am still trying to put together an investigation team for the Michigan/Metro Detroit area, as long as you're within driving distance to hopefully make it to some monthly investigations. I'm trying to put together a team that we can hopefully make some video content for YouTube, create a possible show out of it, and dive into paranormal investigations, cryptid hikes/investigations, UFO sightings, and of course checking out other bizarre phenomenon. And if that sounds like something you might be interested in joining, then go and check out the Google form, which is available down in the show description. Fill out the application, and I should be hopefully getting back to people with those in the next few weeks once I get them stockpiling up a little bit, because I have a few specific types of people that I'm looking for it, and then of course from there, anybody else that sticks out and sparks my interest, of course, I will shoot you a message. And on top of that, of course, I am still trying to look for new topics and ideas to be able to get into and discuss on the show. So if you have any ideas for any new topics or discussions that you guys would like to see on the show, or if you're possibly a guest who has some ideas that they would like to present on the show and get into and talk about, then you guys can of course hit me up any way that you guys see fit. Of course, I'm available on social media, and you guys can also email me, which leads into my next point. Just a quick message: this podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if anybody has an encounter or experience they would like to share on the show, or possibly even have me investigate, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text the hotline. That number is 313-364-1551. And of course, if you guys leave voicemails, I am trying to put together a hopefully monthly show where we go over a bunch of your guys' different paranormal experiences and have some conversations about it. Got a few ideas of people that I'm going to have bounce in and do that show with me, of course, but the only way that's ever going to happen, of course, is if you guys contact me and of course get a hold of me. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available on the link tree, which of course is available down in that show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show the local legend who's been writing some of the books that actually inspired me to start diving into the creature stuff that I do today. Please welcome to the show the one, the only, Jonathan Rand.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad, man. This is actually a long time coming because back when I was a kid, man, I used to read your books, and it actually is honestly what started getting me into a lot of the creature stuff that I dive into now. So honestly, this is one of those shows that I never thought would have ever ended up happening. You know, it used to pop up at my school. Actually, I think you actually showed up to either 2 or 3 different schools that I had been to back when I was a kid. So honestly, this is awesome. We were able to set this up luckily because I just happened to show up to a book carnival that my daughter was interested in going in. Had no idea you were going to be there. Quickly kind of sparked up a conversation with you, but I knew you were kind of busy and stuff because you're signing books for all the kids and stuff. But really glad to have made this happen, man. And I'm really, really excited and looking forward to this one.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, happy to be here.
So for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do, and anybody that's outside of Michigan maybe doesn't, but I assume that everybody from Michigan has definitely heard of Michigan Chillers. But for anybody that may not have heard about it, I want you to let them know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your books.
Yeah, I started with, as I mentioned, the Michigan Chiller series. I'd started actually writing adult fiction before that, and that kind of got me, kind of dovetailed into the Michigan Chiller series. I wrote a series, not a series, but a couple of adult fiction novels that did pretty well regionally around the Great Lakes area, and that led into a series called Michigan Chillers. I had been working on one of the books I wrote was a book called Ferocity, and it was about a giant muskellunge that lives in Mullet Lake, Michigan, and eats people. So it's kind of like your freshwater Jaws. And I had a riot. I had so much fun writing that book. But during that time of actually working on that story, I wanted to come up with a simile, kind of like a metaphor. Like if you took everything about Michigan, particularly northern Michigan, and you know the fresh water and the clean air and you know all the beauty of the landscape, and you put it into a bottle and you sold it on you know, as a beverage, what would you call it? And that's what my challenge was. I wanted to come up with a name. Well, the name I chose that I went with in my book was called a Coorville Cooler. Coorville was the fictitious town in the book. So I thought, okay, Coorville Cooler, that sounds pretty cool. I'll use that. But one of the names I came up with was a Michigan Chiller. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. You know, it kind of sounds like, and I told my wife, I said, you know, it kind of sounds like a series of kids' books. And right around that time, and during that summer, I'd been going through some of my boxes of books in the basement and found some of the old books that I had read when I was growing up. And most of them were like of a scary nature. I had books on, you know, UFOs and Bigfoots and, you know, things like that, anything like that, ghost stories, haunted houses.
I feel like it's impossible to be a Michigander and not be into that stuff because there's just so much folklore around Michigan. It's like everybody's in at least a little bit of the paranormal, a little bit of something. Yeah,
there's some, you know, it's the thing. There's something out there somewhere, no matter where you are from, whether it's Dogman or, you know, I was big into, when I was in 4th and 5th grade, big into UFOs and things and you know, the Outer Limits and Twilight Zone. I was always watching scary movies. And I think a lot of kids are like that too. I think we, you know, gravitate towards those, the scary books. And that's kind of what I thought about. I thought, you know, this whole Michigan Chillers thing would be kind of cool. I could write different stories about different places in, you know, in the state. So if the person reading the book was from that city or town, maybe, you know, they would know of some, you know, at least it would be fun to read about places they've been to, or even if kids that were visiting the areas. So I came up, my first book, I wanted to pick a place that was really popular. So I chose Mackinac Island. We don't live too far from Mackinac Island. And I wrote a book called Mayhem on Mackinac Island. And it was so much fun. I'd written 3 adult novels at that time. And as I mentioned, they did pretty good just regionally, but it was exciting and it was fun. Writing for a book, you know, about kids was something that was really kind of different, and I had so much fun doing it. And the first book came out in March of 2000.
I think that was honestly probably one of the first horror books I ever read as a kid. So that's also really, really cool to say.
Oh, good. Cool. Yeah. It was a fun book. I really concentrated on, I really wasn't focused on, I wasn't trying to catch a wave. I wanted to do something different. I remember going into, you know, some of the, at the time, there were the 4 big chains. We had, you know, we had Barnes & Noble, we had B. Dalton, Walden Books, and Borders. And I would go into these bookstores and some of the real large libraries, and it was really intimidating because I was like, man, I want to do something, you know, I want to do something different, but what am I going to do that's different from all of these books, you know, on these shelves? So I really wanted to focus on something like, you know, doing something that was not mainstream. It would be really something kind of different. And that's really kind of what really excited me about the Michigan Chillers is setting these books in different towns and not making them, not making them history lessons really, but just, I had fun coming up with the titles, using alliteration for the titles. And I thought, when I come up with a title, it was fun to all of a sudden think, okay, cool. All right, I got to, dinosaurs destroy Detroit. Who couldn't write a story about dinosaurs destroying Detroit? I mean, that was just a riot. And it was a lot of fun, just the entire process of brainstorming, putting together Mayhem on Mackinac Island. The book was released, and it wasn't too long after that was out. I got a call from a teacher friend of ours named Sarah Bonnet, and she said, hey, all of my kids in the classroom and even the kids around the school, they're reading your book, Mayhem on Mackinac Island. Would you come in and talk? And I was like, well, yeah, I would, but what do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? I had no idea. And she said, the kids they would love to, maybe read a little bit, just talk to them about the process. And so I did, and it was a riot. I had so much fun. I had no idea exactly how it would go. I thought I was just going to go in and talk to her class, but they wound up bringing in, it was like the entire school in the gymnasium. And it was a riot. I had so much fun. The kids, I don't remember what I talked about. I think I read a little bit.
Do you remember the name of that elementary school by chance, just out of curiosity?
Oh, man. It wasn't, you know what? Mrs. Chillers, do you remember the school I spoke at? Was it Mrs. Bonnet's school? What was that school? Do you remember that one? Was it Black River or was it East? I think, yeah, okay, there you go. Right from Mrs. Chillers downstairs. Black River, I think that was the elementary school, was Black River. I spoke there. I had a great time with the kids, and one thing led to another. And it was about 2 weeks later, we got a phone call at home, and I was like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I'm a friend of Sarah's, and I'm a teacher over at such and such a school. Would you come and talk to our kids?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that." And then it just snowballed. I mean, teachers, were calling their friends and saying, "Hey, you got to get this guy," and it was so much fun. I developed a program that. I didn't, even from early on when I started doing this more and more, I didn't want to be like, a salesman type person. I didn't want to be in there just trying to sell my book. I really felt that if I could share my experiences and what reading and writing has done with me in my life, and if I could deliver that message and have it really resonate with these kids through humor, interaction, then I really thought that's my job. And if they buy my books, that they like books in my books, that's great. I'm fully aware that not all kids are going to be interested in my books, and that's perfectly fine. But my goal, I think, was to hopefully get them to think about books in a different way. So maybe a kid was sitting in the audience thinking, I'm not really a big fan of books. I never really cared for books, but that guy was funny. That guy was cool. So maybe they might think differently about a book and give a book a chance, whether it was Harry Potter or a Goosebumps book or something like that. And that's kind of, and then, literally within that first year, I don't even know how many schools I wound up visiting, but it was, probably close to 100. And then after that, it's been almost every school year. It's been, 140, 150 schools a year. Not so much this year. I'm taking a little bit more time off right now. But I've been doing that now for coming up on 25 years of the American Chillers series in March. And the Michigan Chillers, I'm sorry. The American Chillers series came along shortly after the Michigan Chillers. They came first one came out in December of 2001. I'd written 10 books in the Michigan Chillers series, and I'd received letters from kids that had read my books, and letters from kids not even in Michigan, kids in different states that had visited our state, and they'd write me letters, great letters, and these kids were writing letters, and they were coming up with titles for their state, and hey, you could write about this, you should write about this, and here's some information about our state, and it was kind of cool. I just kind of smiled inside because I'd thought that, if the Michigan Chillers did get popular, a logical expansion would be something, on a more state level. So I started that the American Chillers series, the Michigan Mega Monsters, and then Ogres of Ohio, and there's 45 books out now in the American Chillers series, and that led to different series of books from Freddie for Norton or Fearless First Grader, and the Adventure Club, and now yeah, and now 25 years down the road, 140 books and almost 7 million in print. So things are going along pretty strong.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the last time I was up north, I realized that you guys have a straight up like storefront now too. And I mean, that's awesome. I was hoping that you could find somewhere with everything all in one place, because it's like, you know, you go to the library and the books are kind of scattered because kids are interested in this one, they're interested in this one. Like, it's cool that you actually have your own store where you're able to have a collection of everything. Because even within bookstores, it's like they only carry specific ones or ones that are near their area. So,
well, it's, you know, because I've got so many, like I've got about 104, just over 140 titles now. And I mean, I can sympathize with the bookstore. I mean, you know, where do you put all those? You know, that's a lot of inventory to have. The store Chillermania is in Indian River, and it's been there since we've been there. This next year will be the 20th anniversary. So we've been there for quite a while. And it just kind of came about by necessity because we had so many people, you know, quite literally like coming to our house. You know, we live in a little town. It's pretty easy to figure out where we live. And so people were coming to our house thinking like we have a cash register, like, you know, next to the microwave or the coffee pot. And, you know, it's kind of fun, but it was also a little, you know, it was kind of like, okay, we don't really have all that much privacy, you know, when people were just showing up at our house. And we were growing quite a bit too, at the time. And, I thought, well, you know, if we're going to have warehouses, and we're going to have, you know, I've got kind of a business manager. I got my wife. I got a couple of other people working for us. You know, we might as well have some kind of like a retail store where people could stop in. But I really needed a good location. There's a guy by the name of Chuck Stoik, a great guy, and he had a used car dealership on US 27, which butts up to I-75. So it's kind of easy on, easy off, exit 313. And I would see Chuck out there every day. I'd drive by. And I stopped in one day and just introduced myself, and we chatted. And he'd be out there smoking a cigarette, drinking a Coca-Cola, and I think if he sold maybe, you know, a couple you know, cars a summer, he was probably pretty happy. Just a good old boy down home. And we got talking that summer, and I was asking him about, you know, tell him a little bit about what I did, and long story short, we kind of worked the deal, and I bought the place from him and turned it into what we call Chillermania. We got 2 warehouses there, and it's pretty cool. We get people that come from all over the country, you know, that will stop in there. Most recently, we had one kid that flew out from Los Angeles with his dad. Once they found out that we had a store, his dad promised him that he'd take him to it. So they flew out from Los Angeles, which is pretty cool. So, but it's open in the summertime. We're open 7 days a week. We got our dogs there. It's a mom and pop shop all the way, but we just it's filled with tons of people. And then in the wintertime, we're open like 3 days a week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But we always leave the doors open because where there's people there, we're always doing a lot of shipping. And so if somebody shows up, the lights are always on, and certainly happy to autograph books and sell books if anybody's interested.
I mean, I got my daughter into your books finally, actually, because of that reading carnival that we had brought her to. It was one of those things I was trying to get her into reading them for a while, and it took her actually physically like seeing like your ambiance, like the way you kind of carry yourself, like the legendary glasses that you always wear and stuff. And now she's all into it, man. Like, since it's kind of coming into Christmas now, she's been reading your one about the Yeti one, the Abominable Snowman one.
Oh yeah, good, cool.
Which is one of my favorites when I was a kid. And now, next time we go up north, we have some family that lives up near Gaylord, and she said we got to stop at the store. So you're gonna expect us up there at some point.
Yeah, good. Well, cool. Yeah, good. Sounds good.
Hold on tight, everyone. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. But if you don't mind taking a second to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook, and Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, I'd greatly appreciate it. And feel free to spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show. And I mean, you're talking about how you kind of inspired the books through kind of like a drink. Have you ever considered trying at the store to create like Michigan Chiller drinks? Because you could definitely make like a flavor per book. Like, I mean, that'd be a really cool idea. Make collectible bottles and stuff.
You know, I guess no, not necessarily. I thought it'd be fun to like have in the summertime. It'd be fun to have like an ice cream shop with there too. You know, so and that we could have some ice cream, and that we'd probably dovetail and have like coffee for moms and dads. You know, Michigan Mega Monster Mocha or something like that. But we haven't. I've thought about it, but it's always just kind of a pipe dream. I'm not sure if that'll ever actually come to fruition.
Hey, if you ever got into that aspect, you didn't get into necessarily the bottling part. You could definitely still make them themed and make chillers that have like, you know, where you had the little bit of ice ice cream mixed in with like the slush or something, and kind of have like the spiral going, and you could even like add in like little monsters or something like that on the top. Like there's a lot of cool ideas you could do with that, man.
We've had, I've seen this several times where they'd have like a Michigan Chiller's birthday, kind of like a birthday theme where families would do that for their kids, and where they've made birthday cakes like Michigan Chillers. They put the Michigan Chillers logo on a birthday cake, and they have like gummy worms and bugs on it, and they'll bring me pieces of their cake from their birthday party, which is pretty cool. So.
I mean, did you ever expect that it was going to turn into what it ended up turning into? Because like I was saying earlier, like if you're from Michigan, I guarantee you've heard of these books, and it seems like it's inspired multiple generations of kids, and for different reasons. Because I mean, one, you've kind of inspired some of like the people that dive into folklore, cryptids, aliens, all that kind of stuff. You've inspired like horror writers, and just in general, just like kids reading, because kids like to read some creepy stuff. And I mean, even connecting in with like cities and everything too, that kind of brings like a whole other validity into stuff too. Because kids, when it comes to like just reading like a fantasy book, like they have a harder time like trying to place themselves into the book. So it almost kind of breaks that barrier where kids can start trying to think about putting themselves in a character's shoes if it's actually like a city that they live in too. So it kind of brings in this whole other like alternate dimension to like Michigan. And I feel like that kind of inspired people to even get into writing like science fiction and stuff too. Because anybody that I've talked to that's from Michigan that's gotten into cryptozoology, writing books, like everybody who writes the horror stuff all knows who you are. And they have all been inspired by reading your stuff when they were kids. Because most of us that are, in my field around right now are around 30 or so. So, we were like in that prime of like when you were first starting off and going into all the schools and everything. Cause I mean, I was in elementary school in the 2000s, and I remember you popping up at Miami Elementary, Fox Elementary, a bunch of different ones. And that's all the way in the bottom corner of the state. So, you're going literally to the opposite side of the state to go to these schools. And that's awesome. Really, really authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's become a big part of. I still do that, and it's. I really didn't realize how enjoyable and how much I missed the school visits and those programs until COVID, and I couldn't do it anymore, or at least for a while. And I was like, man, I love the energy, I love that give and take, and I love being able. I love seeing excitement in the kids' eyes about books and about reading, and I don't take any of that for granted. I think it's great that guys like yourself and your daughter.
You're actually is what's helping her go into chapter books, because last year she wasn't too confident about reading. Now she's starting to build up because we've been regularly taking her to the library, and the first chapter books that she's deciding to tackle is Michigan Chillers. So like you're also that entryway into her actually getting into chapter books just because of the content, because she loves reading about monsters, Bigfoot. She's been obsessed with killer clowns lately, and I know you have the clowns from Kalamazoo.
Creepy clowns.
Yep. So that was the first one she wanted to pick out. So it's inspired her to get into chapter books. So even on another level, cool. Like I thank you for doing that too.
Well, good. Well, that's I think to me that's just an incredible honor to have. Just because it's going to be she's going to start reading the Michigan Chillers or the American Chillers, and she'll enjoy it. And then, but it's not going to be too long before she's going to need more. And I really. I get a great feeling knowing that I'm a small part of hopefully developing that lifelong love of reading, among someone like yourself, someone like your daughter, or any other kid. Reading to me when I was growing up, it was just fun. That's all it was. I saw my parents read. I saw them read for pleasure. And to me, I just thought that was a cool, that's what I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be like my mom. And I thought, well, one way I can do that is I can read a book, because that's what they do. So I learned to read at a pretty early age. And when I started reading on my own, I was off. There was something really magical about reading, about books. And I also, and I think it wasn't, I discovered this on my own. And I think probably a little maybe later in life, I don't know, but I think it was probably between my 4th and 5th grade year of school. I discovered a book called My Side of the Mountain by Gene Craighead George. And I would take it, I grew up on the Ausable River, Crawford County in Grayling, just an incredible, wonderful area for a kid that loved the forest, and I was outdoors, I was fly fishing. I would take this book with me. If I wasn't catching fish, I'd sit down on the side of the bank and I'd read this book over and over and over. And I remember one day, it was in August, and it was just a really, really hot day. And I was reading a part in My Side of the Mountain where Sam Gribley was in this. He basically made his fort, his house inside of this gigantic hemlock tree. He was a kid living by himself in the woods, but it was this snowstorm outside, and he was describing the ice and he's describing the snow and how cold it was outside, but inside of this he was toasty warm. And I don't know what prompted me at that moment, but I all of a sudden realized, hey, I'm sitting here on the banks of the Au River, and when I'm opening this book, I really feel like I am now transported to the Catskill Mountains, and I am Sam Gribley. And at that point, I began to think, okay, if that's what happens with this book, what does that mean about, for all those other books at the library, in Grayling, in my school library, the public library, that must hold true for those books as well. And especially when I started to write, that's one of the things that I've always, I really focused on putting the reader, trying to build that connection so that the reader was part of the story. When you're reading a book in the Michigan Chillers or the American Chillers or any of the other books I write, I really want the reader to have that connection, to really actually feel like they are experiencing the story. In fact, all the books in the Michigan Chillers and the American Chillers, they're all written in the first person. There's not a lot of character by my own definition, I don't do a lot of character development. I want that character development done by you. That's a trick I learned from radio. You can't sit there and describe your characters in radio. Most of the commercials that I did while I worked in radio I'd have actors and actresses, so it was like these little 60-second situation comedies. And you can't describe what a woman looks like or what a man looks like. You have to do that through voice. You have to do that through sound effects. And that's what I really lean on in my books. And I think that helps bridge that gap with kids. And I hope that I'm fairly certain that it does, when they're feeling that chill, that spooky feeling about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in this next chapter? And, there's that connection there. They've bought into it. They're feeling what that main character is feeling, and they have become that main character. And that's really what I try to focus on when I write my stories.
Talk about a really good type of book that unfortunately seems to have died out, the pick your own adventure books, because I remember reading those at the same time, and it kind of put yourself into that situation, which I kind of feel helped me to become a better writer, better storyteller, and again, kind of inspired a lot of what I do today. But I mean, just being able to put yourself in the person's shoes and actually try to figure out what they're thinking, like, it leaves a lot more up for interpretation. So again, it kind of makes it more fun for the kids because they're not just blankly reading pages or words on a page. They're actually trying to understand, trying to get behind the character, and again, put themselves in the position of the character.
Yeah, it makes it a little more interactive for them, and hopefully it helps build that bond with them.
And I know that you said that you went from writing a lot of adult novels, and then you started moving into the kid stuff. Did you find it a lot more difficult to write the kid stuff, or did you find it easier? Where do you think? Do you think it's more difficult to write the children's books than it is to be able to write the adults' books?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure, because when I write adult fiction, adults tend to be a little more patient. And for me, that allows me to explore things a little bit more. I can try different things. I can, as far as expressions and in different avenues of the story that I want to take. With the books in the Michigan Chillers and the American Chillers, I'm aware that kids don't have that. They don't have that focus quite yet. So if you read the books that I've written, most of the chapters are relatively short, and that's by design. I really try to build that. To build that suspense.
Helps the kids feel like they're accomplishing something too, and they can go a couple pages, finish a chapter, a couple pages, finish a chapter. Because if you got 10, 20 page chapters, sometimes you kind of lose them because they don't feel like they're getting anywhere with it. Yeah.
Imagine, being a kid who has never really read very much or has had difficulty reading. Imagine all of a sudden if they stop reading and they close the book and they realize, oh my gosh, I'm halfway done with this book. and then they're all of a sudden proud of themselves. It's I mean, I got to believe that's just a gigantic hurdle to cross. And then having that same kid think, well, I'm going to finish this book tonight, and then I'm going to get the next one, and then I'm going to get the next one, to me, like I said, I have fun writing them. Your original question was, was it more difficult or challenging? And I think the challenging thing more with adults is that they're going to demand a little bit more. The books are quite a bit longer than the books in the Michigan Chillers and the American Chillers books, but they really do pose, a lot of work. And that's one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize, especially those people that have never really tried writing books before. And I see this quite a bit when, book signings. In fact, I've seen it a lot at book signings. When an adult will come up to me and say, I'm going to write a book one day, and I'll ask them, well, what do you like to write? Well, I haven't really written anything yet. I just had a couple of ideas. And well, what do you like to read? Well, I used to read this, or I used to read this. And they walk away, and I'm thinking, I highly doubt it. And I'll do anything I can to help anybody write a book. I mean, I will offer suggestions. I will talk to them. But if that's their attitude, they're never going to get a book written. What's happened in that instance, most cases, they read a book, it was easy to read, and it was fun for them, and they enjoyed it. They didn't realize that an author worked really, really hard to make that book easy to read and to make that book really exceptional. There's an enormous amount of work that goes into that, and I'm sure as a writer, it's not, you just don't throw these things together. Some people do, and it shows. I take it much more personal. I want my stories to be good. I want them. I'm not going to throw out what I think is junk, just because I'm on a deadline by a publisher and I've got to get something out there. I don't, especially with kids. I don't want a bad book floating out there. I want something that I really am happy with. And every single book that I've ever written, I'm very, very pleased with. Now, some I like better. The dinosaur books, I love those. I wrote a book, Boyne City Bigfoot Beast is the newest book in the Michigan Chillers series. I've always wanted to write a Bigfoot book and finally got around to that. So, but as far as, they're all like, I got over 140 children, and I can't really pick a favorite.
I was going to say, I feel like it would be almost impossible to do that, especially if you put that much time, effort, and love into your books. Because, you got the people, again, that you say just kind of push them out. But if you're actually taking the time to make sure that you're writing something that you're happy with before you even consider pushing it out, and even the fact that you're independently published, which I feel like makes it a million times easier because you don't have to sit on those deadlines, you can really get stuff where you actually wanted to. And again, it's like, it's hard to pick a favorite when it's all like your loved children. Like you've spent all this time and effort to create all of them. You've created all these story developments. You have different aspects of different ones that you like. Like, it's really good to be able to have something that you can walk away from and be happy with, because it seems like that's a curse with a lot of creative types, is that you kind of have to like stop yourself at a certain point because you're at a deadline, whatever. And you always will like kind of sit there and look back at it like, man, I wish I would have done this like a little bit different. But if you're able to self-publish, you can just do it exactly how you want to.
I'll go back. Yeah, and I'll still do that. I still go back over some of my books that I wrote, even 20 years ago, and I'll think, oh man, I should have wrote this, or I would have structured that sentence this way. I should structure that sentence this way. And then I also realize, no, I probably wouldn't, because that's who I was at that time. That's how I wrote at that time. And, it was, I realized that at that time, I did the best I could do. And if I look at it now and think, okay, I could do better. Well, okay, I could do better today. But 20 years ago, I think, that was the best I could do. And I would stand by that, whether anybody liked that book or that particular story or not.
Hold on, guys. We have to take a break to pay some bills. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. It's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits with 7-day free trials available. And we are back, so let's hop right in. That's one of those things, too, that it kind of gives you like a range of like where you've been to where you are now, because the people that will like start a project but they never like officially finish it, you can never go back and say like, this is where I started from to this is where I am now. Like, it's really, really cool to see your transition as you become a writer, become a better writer, start bringing in different aspects into things, and even be able to kind of come back around where, like, if you had a particular idea that you really wanted to do for this book, but you didn't do it at the time, now instead of trying to go back and rewrite that book, you can just kind of bring that element into a newer book and still be able to use the element that inspired you from reading one of your older books.
Yeah, yeah, and things like that. It's a wonderful, serendipitous, thing when that happens. In fact, it literally happened. Something like that happened today. I journal. The first thing that I work on every day, I write every single day. I can't recall a day in the last 20 years that I have not written. And I started journaling. I started keeping a journal in May of the year 2013, and I've kept it up. And I've done it by hand as well as on computer. I'll go back and forth. But that's the first thing that I do, first thing in the morning with my coffee. And this morning, that happened. I was working on my journal and I was describing some sounds, what I was hearing early in the morning. And it morphed into this section. I thought, I can use this to help describe this girl with this ice cream truck that comes by, and it gets real kind of dark. What happens? But it all just emerged from that sound and what I was writing in my journal. So I was able to take something from my journal and I'm bringing it back full circle with a story, a different story altogether in a fictional light.
In a weird way, it's like a full circle. You're like inspiring yourself.
Yeah. And that, it doesn't happen enough as far as I'm concerned. But that's the thing is like you have to, you have to write, and you have to do it all the time. And I think, that's one of the things that I talk to a lot of kids I have writing. We started in 2007. We had a camp called Author Quest. There was nothing like it anywhere in the world. And we did it for up until 2020 when COVID hit, but we did it 3 times a year. First year we did it just once, and then, it was twice a summer, and then we did a winter camp as well. But it was for kids 10 to 13. They came from all across the country. And I leased this big, huge lodge in the middle of the woods. I brought in 30 people as far as the staff goes, and 60 kids, break them up into groups of 12, and we would just write all, the entire weekend. I brought in 4 other authors, and they would conduct classes, so we would all kind of rotate. But one of the things that I was really strongly adamant about, and I am to this day when I talk to kids about becoming a better writer, is like you have to write every single day. There's no excuse, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I see so many people that, like, again, I'll go back to some of the adults that I talk to that they're like, well, I don't have time to write. And I'm like, sorry, man, if you don't have time to write, you are not going to finish a book. It's just all there is to it.
If you have a passion, you got to make time for it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people too, they think of it again, and going back to they've read a book and they thought, well, that was pretty easy. I could do that. And I will wish anybody the best. I really do. I don't know who has a book in them and who doesn't, but I do know that you're setting yourself up for failure if you think that you can just sit down and crank out a book and have it be something that you're happy with and something that is successful. You're going to be disappointed. But if you look at it seriously and say, okay, this is a valuable project. It's worthwhile of my time. How do I approach it? What is the best way I can do this? Well, time. You're going to have to spend time every single day working on that story. And that's one of the things I really try to get across to kids is that keep that story fresh. If you've got something going 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, I really like a longer allotted time. And, to sit down, I like to sit down and go, okay, I can look at the clock. I've got at least 2 hours to write. And then you just get lost in the story. It's really important to me to be able to just kind of, stay focused on that story. But that's one of the biggest things that most important things that I recommend, not only kids, but adults too, is if you really have a story in you and you want to write a book, sit down and take the time to write every single day.
You got to do it as like a step-by-step too, because a lot of people, it's like, it's a lot to be able to sit down and be able to take on all this stuff. So if there's something that you're really passionate about, you got to learn how to break it down into steps, like if you're trying to write a book, write your outline for it, start writing out a basic script of like what you want to happen within each chapter, start kind of like developing your characters on another page, like get all the pieces together. And then once you have that, then you can start connecting the puzzle to actually write the story. Because like you were saying, a lot of people think that they're just going to sit down and crank out a novel, and it doesn't work like that with any creative process. Even like people that are doing paintings, people that are doing podcasts, whatever it is, there's like a step-by-step that you got to do to get to that final end result. And it's a matter of knowing how to break that down sometimes, because I feel like with a lot of people, they have a great story in them. They have something that they're really, really passionate about, but they get discouraged over the bulk part of the project. But anything in life, you got to take it step by step. That's the easiest way of doing it. And it's the easiest way for you to be able to wrap your head around what you're trying to do and not just spit something out that you're not going to be happy with. Because at least you set yourself up and you create a framework for yourself to be able to get to the point that you want to be able to get to.
Yeah, you're right. And it's those little victories, it's those baby steps, breaking things down, whether it's, creating an outline, which I do for all of my stories. And I'm really a big proponent of that too. When I talk to kids, I'll ask kids in groups and adults too. And I'll say, if you're going to all go to Disneyland or Disney World, there's one thing that you need to get there. And if you don't have this, you'll never make it. What is it? And we go around the room and kids are like, oh, you need to have money, you have to have clothes, and you have to have a car, you have to have this. And in most cases, I have to give them a real strong hint. But the answer I'm looking for is a map, a GPS. You have to have a destination. You have to have that in mind. If you don't, you're going to drive around and around until you run out of gas. And everybody in the audience will say that out loud, and I don't even have to finish it. And I'll ask everybody. I did this not long ago with a bunch of adults, a couple hundred guys in the room, people in the room. And I said, how many of you ever started writing a book and you never finished? And I mean, every hand in the room went up. And I said, you ran out of gas. You had no idea where you were going. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I had 10 great ideas today. Any one of them probably would have made, I think, a fabulous book. What are you going to do with it? That's the problem. Is anybody can get a great idea. What's really going to make the difference is how the story is told and where it's going. Where is this story going to go? If you have no idea where your story is going to go, there's a good chance you're probably never going to get there. I'm a really big proponent of that. Now, in that same breath, the thing that I also bring up with kids and adults too is that there's a lot of authors that will tell you the exact same or exact opposite of what I tell them. Stephen King is one, and he'll say, don't write an outline. Sit down and just start and see where you go. Yeah, I mean, come on, the guy's had a little success, I think, so he knows what he's doing.
And he makes those monster books too. I mean, I don't know how you'd be able to sit down and write that whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it works for him. I mean, it really works for him. For me, it doesn't. And this is one of the things that I tell kids. It's like, I've got a way to write a book. I don't have the way to write a book. I have a way to write a book. And I'm going to show you my way. And I hope some of it helps. If it doesn't, chuck it out. Go talk to another author. Go to another class. Read another book about writing. Find out what other authors do. And don't stop. Do that for the rest of your life. Constantly be an information sponge. I've got, you can't see two of them here, but most of them, I've got tons of books over here and then up, right directly in front of me. And they're all my writing books. They're all books by different authors on their writing techniques. And there's thousands of them. Each one of them is a college course. Each one of them just incredibly valuable. Some, I pick up a little bit more than others, but I'm always amazed. I'm 60 years old and been writing now I started writing for radio when I was 18. I mean, it's been my career. Just when I think, well, I know quite a bit about writing, I find a book and I go, oh my gosh, I never really thought of it from this aspect. And you get overwhelmed with realizing, how little you don't know about the craft you think you know so much about.
And I mean, we were talking about it a little bit before we actually started recording, but I think it'll definitely inspire a lot of people to actually get out there and really, really do their passions. The step from how you went from radio into writing these children's books, like the process that you did in order to make it so that you were able to do this, definitely inspiring. I think it might help a lot of people. Just those little victories.
Yeah, when I started writing adult fiction, and I was picked up by a publisher. And in the meantime, I started this audiobook called Saint Helene, and it just kind of got started. That one was successful regionally, along with Ferocity, and then of course the whole idea for the Michigan Chillers. Those were all things. It's like if I hadn't written Ferocity if I had not written that adult novel, which is something completely different than the Michigan Chillers, if I hadn't written that, there probably never would be a Michigan Chillers series. I might still be doing radio commercials and book narrations now instead of writing books.
Are you still printing that book, by the way? Just for all the adult readers out there that might be interested in checking it out.
Yeah, I've written several books for adults. Ferocity, probably the one that is, in fact, it's out of print right now. I've got more on the way. I wrote a book called Bestseller. It's under my pen name of Christopher Knight. Totally different than Jonathan Rand. I wanted two different names because there's two different genres. For the books that I write for adults, you don't want your second grade, third grade, daughter or son reading. It's just adult content, nothing different than mainstream adult fiction. But I didn't want books to get into the hands of an audience that shouldn't be reading them. But a book I wrote called Bestseller a number of years ago was made into a movie, and it's about a New York serial killer that stalks a New York literary agent. She comes to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to get away, and lo and behold, he follows her, and she doesn't know it. So.
And then you had mentioned, actually, because this is, again, one of those things that it's following your dreams, that when you were trying to get these books to a point where you'd be able to actually do this stuff, you were going to like bookstores by yourself. You were handing out audiobooks to places, trying to get people to pick up your books. I mean, if you want to tell people a little bit about that process, I mean, it might help some inspiring writers that maybe are sitting on a book. They don't know how to distribute it, how to get it out there. And I mean, even easier nowadays with the internet, but sometimes you got to go back to that grassroots, because it really makes a difference when you actually are in front of somebody versus just sending them an email.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I had this idea for this audiobook called Saint Helene, and I wrote it, I narrated it, I produced the music. I shouldn't say I didn't create the music. I had licensed the music. I created the sound effects, most of them. And I did it in my studio. I mastered everything, engineered it. I even duplicated it. I bought a high-speed cassette duplication machine. I created the artwork for the cover. I assembled it, I put this thing all together, and I had this really cool audiobook. And it occurred to me at the time, I went around to the bookstores, and the bookstores in northern Michigan were very, very kind. They were great people, and they were like, "Oh, this is really interesting. Of course, we'll stock these, and I'm sure you'll find the audience for them." But there weren't a lot of bookstores at the time, and I thought, I've got to figure out a way to get these out there a little bit more. And it occurred to me that we live in this big tourist area. People come here from all around the world. They come here to go to the beach. They come here to go, sailing, swimming. They go hiking in the forest. I mean, we've just got a billion things to see and do in northern Michigan. But they don't necessarily come to northern Michigan to go to a bookstore. But they do have to eat, they have to sleep, and they have to put gas in their car. So my wife and I, in the summer of 1998, we took all these audiobooks that I had created, and we took them around to gas stations, restaurants, and hotels. And I would go in and like Lil Abner saying, "Hey, here's my audiobook, and I'd like to have it, if you'd like to sell it, and I want to know if you want to sell it." And most of them were really like, "Well, we're not really interested because we don't sell, books here." And I'd be like, "That's exactly why I want my book here, because I don't have any competition." And a lot of them would say, "We don't have the money, we don't have the budget for that." And I'd say, "Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave you 5 books. And if you sell any, you get this amount, I get this amount. If you don't sell any, I'm going to be back in 2 weeks. I'm going to give you one for free. I'll take the rest of the ones with me, and you'll never see me again." And that worked. That worked really well. But the interesting thing was, a couple days later, is that they started calling our house phone and saying, "Hey, those audiobooks, they're gone. We need more of them." So we developed this network of like these different places we'd stop from driving over to Petoskey and up to Mackinac and over to Alpena and back around and loop through. We do that like once a week and such. And
don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to rock some gear for one of your favorite podcasts, creatures, or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media store on Etsy and Printify for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. The most recent design available is the Squatch Country Fear and Loathing parody design, with Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson and Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, with artwork by Chris Holm of the Conspire Theory podcast. Welcome back to the show. Now let's dive right in.
What happened too, I had a really cool thing happen with the audiobook Saint Helene. given it to a friend of ours by the name of Mike Ridley, incredibly talented musician, singer, songwriter, goes all over the place, and he lives not too far from here. And I gave him a copy of the audiobook, and he said that he'd been performing somewhere in Detroit, the Detroit area, but he got home real late at night, and he had to sit in the driveway because he was like 15 minutes to the end of this audiobook, and he said he had to finish it up because it was driving him crazy, and he just loved it. And I thought, well, that was really, really super cool. Well, we get a phone call about, I don't know, sometime over the summer. And it's a producer for a guy by the name of Ken Calvert. And Ken Calvert was at the time on WWJ radio in Detroit. And it was the producer, and the producer said, hey, Ken knows Mike Ridley. Mike Ridley loaned him your audiobook, and Ken loved your audiobook. Would you do an interview with him? I'm like, well, yeah, okay. Well, we set something up. It was a couple of days later. I was doing this interview, and Ken was incredibly, he was really a wonderful interview, and he was so gracious. I mean, 5 minutes of airtime on WWJ in Detroit. And at the end of this interview, again, remember this, he's been so nice, he's been so kind. He says, tell our listeners where they can get this great audiobook. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, because this radio station is, there's millions of people listening to this radio station. There's no way they can get this. I can't tell them, like, we'll go to the corner of Joe's Mobile in Alanson and get it. So what I did is I started listing. I said, oh, you can get them at Borders, you can get them at Barnes & Noble, and you can get them at Walden Books and all these. And my wife is in the kitchen. She's in the kitchen, and she can hear this conversation. She's looking at me, and she mouths the words. She's like, what are you doing? What are you saying? And I'm like, I'm kind of shrugging. I'm like, what am I supposed to say? Before we were even finished with dinner that night, I hung up the phone. Literally within a half hour, the phone rings, and it was a corporate Borders. This is after hours, but somebody from Ann Arbor was calling from corporate Borders and said, hey, we need a case of those audiobooks. How fast can you get them here? And that kind of started the whole thing as far as, getting some notoriety with the audiobooks. And again, this was actually before the Michigan Chillers were even thought of. That was even before they'd even started. And that solidified that network, and that got us out into a wider market with the audiobooks. But I look back on that, it was just kind of a fun story of how they started to kind of get legs and have a mind of their own.
Got to have your foot in the door somewhere. And a lot of people think that, I'm going to start this project and this is going to be my end goal, not realizing that there's like steps to it. Like, you probably wouldn't even have gotten into any of this stuff if you weren't a broadcaster first. And then you kind of build up from there. Sure. Like, people are always looking about the end destination, but they're not realizing like the path you got to take to get there. Like you were saying a little bit earlier with like the roadmap, just because you want to be a writer doesn't mean that, you're going to get all of your knowledge of writing strictly from writing. Like you kind of bring in all these other key components, and then it ends up resulting in where you're trying to get to eventually.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's I think that's the message that that I really try to hit home with especially when I speak to kids, is that, reading and writing is, I don't tell them reading and writing is fun. I show them that reading and can be really, really fun. Whether you're reading my books, Michigan Chillers, or, it doesn't really matter. But you have kids at that age, they have no idea what good they're doing for their brains by reading. They have no idea what they're doing. I've got a very, very successful friend of mine that I worked for, and actually with, because he was the kind of guy. His name was Del Reynolds, and he could do literally the guy could do anything, and he can do anything, I should say. If you gave him a paper clip and a beer can, he'd come back with a radio station. That's the kind of guy he was. And we would talk about things, because I would read when I was working with him at the radio station. I would bring books in, and he knew I was a big reader, and he said, "Man, I hate reading," and because I just hate reading. And this went on for a while, and finally one day we were talking. I'm like, Del, you might hate to read, but you're an incredible reader. And he's always reading. I said the important part is that you can read, and you do read, because he's always reading these tech manuals in order to fix a transmitter and to do some of these things that he's doing. He needs to assimilate that information. So he's not going to be at the bookstore. You're never going to see Del buying the latest Stephen King novel or a James Patterson book or Harry Potter, but he's a very accomplished reader in his own way. And I think that's what I try to, I hope that by getting kids reading and excited about books at that age, they have no idea where it's going to take them and how important it's going to be for them later on in life.
I mean, even if they don't end up sticking around reading forever, because it seems like nowadays a lot of people have kind of moved to audiobooks, but I mean, just being able to expand your vocabulary and be able to learn how to use different adjectives to describe things better. Like, even if somebody doesn't stick around reading, like, they don't realize how much it does just for simply communication skills.
That's, and you said it right there, communication. That's what, communication is everything. And whether it's the spoken word or the written word, being able to communicate, being able to think in the abstract, being able to focus, that's what reading does for you. And I would argue that even listening to audiobooks in the same way.
I mean, even with the audiobook thing too, it's funny that that's risen as people, quote, don't like reading as much. But the ironic part is that everybody reads text messages and everything. So everybody is still reading. It's just the means of what they're reading, And I mean, even within text messages, I guess it's better than nothing, but you got to get them inspired. And that's kind of what you were talking about with like the tech manuals, is that, somebody that doesn't like to read, all it takes is that one good thing that they seem like they're going to be really, really interested in. Then all of a sudden it doesn't feel like work. And then that leads way into the next book that's like that. And the next book that's like that. Like my argument is that most people that don't like reading just haven't found that book that inspired them to want to keep pushing down that path. It's because they were, forced books that they didn't necessarily want to read. So they got a bad taste in their mouth, and it just takes the right one. And then it'll completely change your mind around on it.
And I think really what it boils down to is we all love stories. Everybody, we are a storytelling species. From text messages to, I don't know how many stories, I mean, I've texting back and forth with various people, private messaging back and forth. I'm getting these stories. I have a school teacher friend of mine that I just received a message from her earlier, and she had some crazy things happen to her earlier today. And I'm excited. I want to hear all about it. She's telling me this crazy thing that happened, and just in this short little synopsis, that's a story. And that's what really drives our lives. That's what makes things really, really exciting and really, really interesting, whether they're fictional or even how we express ourselves in daily life. I really do think that we love stories. We love being read to, and we appreciate good stories. That is my mission with every single book that I write is to create a good story. In fact, I go far as sometimes I don't even consider myself a writer. I consider myself more of a storyteller. How am I going to tell this story so that it has the most impact and get the point across that I want?
That's a good way definitely about thinking about it. And also a good step for a lot of people that get in is like, if you're a good storyteller, you just got to learn how to put your words onto a page, and then you'd be surprised where you end up going with it. Because, I'm one of those people that inspires to write. Like I do write a lot of poetry. I have a whole bottom shelf down here that's filled with like poetry and stuff. And it's like, I inspired to do something with it one day. And it's a matter of like taking that step to get into doing something with it. But I mean, you got to start somewhere. Everybody has to start somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Yep, exactly.
I wanted to be able to spotlight a couple of your books a little bit. So if you have a recommendation for Michigan Chillers, your adult books, American Chillers, whatever they are, I know that like a lot of your Michigan Chiller and American Chiller books aren't necessarily just for kids. Like I actually went back and reread some of them after our last time that we ended up talking in person and stuff. So they're definitely interesting for adults. So if you had a recommendation for, I guess, adults on some of like your personal, I don't want to say personal favorites because you said it's kind of hard to pick personal favorites, but ones that you would suggest for like adults that they might be interested in reading some of your creature books or again, some of your adult books. And then also for some of those people too, if they have kids that are, on the verge of just starting to push into reading and stuff, if you have some recommendations on which ones you think might be some of the best ones for kids to start with.
Yeah, for sure. I would say one of my favorites, all-time favorites in the Michigan Chiller series. I say all-time favorites, but used to be Dinosaurs Destroy Detroit. The one that tops that, I think, right now, is a book called Drummond Island Dog Man, because I think it's a pretty scary book. It's not over the top. Matter of fact, quick side story. At the same Reads Festival that you took your daughter to, I was paid the highest compliment I have ever been paid in my life as a writer, and it came from a kid who was probably 10 years old, and he'd been waiting. You saw the line; it was a pretty long line, but everybody was really good. They were patient, and this kid finally got up there, and his mom looked down and said, "Well, ask your question," and he said, "How do you make your books so scary and so chilling without using blood and gore and violence and stuff?" And it really took me aback that he brought that up and that he noticed it, because that's something that when I talk in my writing classes, I talk about that. I say, I don't think that violence is scary. Those can be crutches. So the thing that's really scary is building that bond with the reader. And that kid had picked up on that throughout all the books. And you read the books that I write in the Michigan Chillers and the American Chillers, and there's none of that. There's no blood. Nobody pulls out a knife. A solution is not created with a handgun or anything of that sort. I really think the hallmark of a good storyteller is to be able to create that bond with the reader and create that emotion without resorting to some of those things. Now, violence is going to be a part of the world, and when I write my adult fiction, then you're going to delve into some of that stuff. But that's not who that target market is for. So that was really kind of cool. And a book like Drummond Island Dogman, what I really like about that, and first of all, it scared my editor. She had to leave. She said she slept with the lights on for a week. So I thought, hey, cool, another satisfied
That's
customer.
some of the best stuff, though, because even with horror movies and stuff, it's the blood and gore isn't necessarily what gets me interested. It's the paranormal stuff or the stuff that gets you so into the story that you're sitting on the edge of your seat, and there's no need for jump scares. There's no blood and gore. It's just the storytelling is so good that you're on the edge of your seat and you just got to hear what happens next. And it's not jump scares.
Yeah. Yep. And this, and Stephen King did something in Salem's Lot that I will never forget, and it is absolutely incredible. There's a part of the book, the reader knows what is going to happen without question. You know that this event is on the horizon quickly. It's coming at you, and page by page, and your heart rate is racing. This is going to be, and you don't know how he's going to do it, but it's going to be bad. And instead of going for this incredible, he doesn't do this long drawn out scene. He ends the chapter with 3 words. He ends it with, "It became unspeakable." And that was like a 2x4 right to your forehead. I was like, oh my gosh, that was just incredible. And just a brilliant piece of writing, brilliant piece of storytelling. And that's what I try. I try to do that with the by ending with kind of cliffhanger chapters with the kids' books. Not so much with adults. They're a little more patient, but you've got to pace it different when you're writing books about adults. Another book I wrote that I think adults would appreciate is I wrote a book called Pandemia back in the year 2008. The media went crazy because we were all going to die of the bird flu. And
it's always something
in the country. Yeah, it's always something. So my wife, we had this really cool American Chillers van. My wife was traveling with me at the time, and so she's driving this van, and I'm writing this book in my laptop computer in the passenger seat, reading it out loud to her as I'm writing this thing. And I knew where it was ending in my head. I did not have an outline for this one, but I knew how the story was going to end. So I was just kind of meandering it along as we made our way through Pennsylvania, New York, and back through Ohio and such. And but it's called Pandemia, and it's about 4 teenagers. And basically it's a novel of the bird flu and the end of the world. And it was a really good seller, and I get more requests for a sequel to that book than I've ever written. And then the pandemic hit in 2020, and it was crazy because I started getting emails and I started getting these letters in the mail. And then the letters just came in by the thousands. And they all basically said the same thing. They're like, dude, your book is coming true right now. And I'm like, I got nothing to do with it. I wrote this a long time ago. But that one still, even to this day, it became a bestseller all over again. And it's called Pandemia. And I wrote it for teenagers, but I get a lot of adults that really enjoy that one. And then bestseller, that'll be, I've got the covers being redesigned, and that'll be, the next edition should be out here soon. That one is a pretty twisted book, and that was made into a movie back in 2014. And check out. In fact, go to the YouTube, look Christopher Knight bestseller, and that should pop right up. And then should be some links on there. You can go watch that.
And just another quick side question too, considering you said that there was a movie version of that one. Has anybody ever came to you and asked about doing anything with like Michigan Chillers or anything as like a TV series or anything like that? Because I would love to see a live action version of your books.
Yeah, I've had that happen. I've turned it down so far, just because I want to have something that's unique with the books that I write. I love movies too, and I'm not slamming movies or anything of the sort, but that's what happens in the publishing world. The series gets popular, and all of a sudden you've got not only do you have T-shirts, but you've got lunchboxes and movies, and I'm all for marketing and such. And I think but for me, I'm looking for a different niche. So I keep things like with the books in the Michigan Chillers and the American Chiller series, they're not movies and they're not ebooks. You can't get them on a Kindle. You can't get them on your, download them as digital ebooks. You have to have a physical book. And I've got a Kindle and I love it. I don't have any problem with it. But for me, I love that. I love the feeling of having a book in my hand. I love collecting books, and I'm hoping that a lot of kids feel the same way. In fact, I think they do, judging by the sales that have just been continuous for the past number of years.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this break, if you might be interested in joining a growing community of like-minded individuals, then pop on over to the Open Minds Media Telegram, a place to discuss high strangeness, conspiracies, and anything else on your mind. Bizarre and open-minded individuals always welcome. Link to join available down in the show description. And we are back, so let's get back to it. I mean, if it says anything, when we ended up going and seeing you at the reading carnival, my daughter got the first book because they ended up giving out bags where it had one of your books included. She went up, she got it signed, of course, and then she started looking around at the other books, and then she ended up waiting in line 3 times to get books signed by you. I don't know if you remember seeing her pop up 3 times, but I mean, just the cover and stuff like that, like it draws kids in. Not even like in a bad way, but just, it draws kids in where they want to collect them. And at least for me, I'm a big proponent and fan of having like a physical copy of stuff. Like there's just nothing that compares to actually holding like a physical book in your hands. So honestly, I have a lot of respect for you that you want to keep your books like that, because then it kind of brings the new generation into not just having everything digital. And even on the other side too, it gives you the full creative control of your book, because with a lot of movies, TV shows, unless like the writer is directly involved in directing it, like they usually kind of side tangent, get into some other places. And then like you were saying, you like to have the kids put themselves in the perspective. And once it becomes like a TV show or a movie, like this is the defined character, this is what it looks like. It kind of pulls away from, I guess, what you were trying to do in the first place. So it's honestly really inspiring that you choose to keep your books where they are, just to kind of bring back like the old feel of like a story and like a book, and not let it get into what it's kind of turned into now, where everything's just marketing, advertising, franchises, and then it takes on a whole life of its own, and the original writer of it completely loses creative control at that point, and then you end up with a lot of these franchise series that are out now where the original writer is like, I want nothing to do with this anymore.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot. I've seen it happen a lot. I talk to authors, and they're real frustrated over it. And I look at it, it's like when kids talk to me about, you mentioned like a book, Terror Stalks Traverse City. That's not my book. That's your book. That's you are now Matt Sorensen in that book when you're reading that story. And that's what I really want it to be. And having that book, having that physical copy, I love autographing books for kids. I think that's kind of cool. And so that they can, they've got something that's personal, something that's collectible. And I focus more on not just the story aspect of it, but the experience as well. When you come to Chillermania, we've got, it's only my books, posters and shirts, and, not a lot of stuff like that. Not much more than that, rather, is what I meant to say. But there's other things too. There's like surprises. I've got like, snakes that pop up at opportune places, and spiders that come down, and bats that fall down in surprising areas. So it's not kind of like visiting like a mini haunted house, but it's all about books. It's all about that reading experience, and that's what I want to stay focused on.
I'm really, really looking forward to bringing my daughter up there next time we end up heading up north. I'll have to make sure I hit you up ahead of time and let you know we're coming, and maybe we can get together, hang out a little bit too on top of it.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. Yeah.
And before we start completely wrapping up, just out of curiosity for the listeners, do you have anything that you're writing currently, or like a next work that's in the process, and when might that next book be coming out?
Yeah, always got something going on. Working on, there's number 22 in the Michigan Chiller series that's called Nightmare Babies of New Boston, and that'll be a fun story. That's about those those Halloween evil babies that you see that at the Halloween shops, and that one is being worked on. And then the next book in the American Chiller series is number 46. That takes place in Kansas. And then a long-awaited book in the Freddie for Norton or Fearless First Graders series, number 14. I want to get that finished and out in 2025 as well.
And I guess another last question. You mentioned a couple of your other book series that you write for kids too. If you just want to kind of give a shout out to each one of those book series, let people know a little bit about them too. If they don't think their kids might be into the Michigan Chiller stuff, at least let them kind of get into some of the other stuff you write.
Yeah, Freddie for Norton or Fearless First Grader is for a little lower reading level, right around first grade. There's even another series that's below that called Dollar Store Danny. Those are for kids that are just getting out of like picture books that are, they're quite not really ready for Michigan Chillers, obviously, but kids in kindergarten that are, these are little chapter books that are like a couple of pages long with illustrations, and, Dollar Store Danny and the Dangerous Dinosaur, Dollar Store Danny and the Shampoo Shark Attack. The gist of the story is a lot of fun. It's basically me when I was about 5 years old going into a store and seeing something and thinking, oh yeah, that's a salt shaker, but man, it looks like a spaceship. And then all of a sudden having this imaginary story. And that's one of the books that I've written in the Dollar Store Danny series is called the Salt Shaker Spaceship. One more series called The Adventure Club. That is about 6 kids live in Mullet Lake or not Mullet Lake, but they live in a small town and there's really nothing for them to do. So they form what they call the Adventure Club. So there's 3 books out in that. There's Ghost in the Graveyard, Ghost in the Grand, and The Haunted Schoolhouse. And then some audiobooks as well. Creepy Campfire Chillers, Volume 1, Creepy Campfire Chillers, Volume 2. A fun story that is available. In fact, I think it's on Spotify, with Jonathan Rand and the Graveyard Shift is what we called this audiobook company from a couple of years ago. And my friend and illustrator Michael Jaycott wrote a story called Fungus of Fear. And I narrated it, and it's great fun. So that's available on Spotify, as well as book number 1 in a series called Nightmare Nation. That's called Village of the Dolls, and that one is available again on Spotify too.
And I'll definitely make sure I include links down in the show description so everybody can find the giant list of all the awesome books that you've written. Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you guys enjoy the show and think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now back with that deep conversation you crave. But before we completely close out, I know you've been saying a lot of inspiring words to the listeners today, but if there's any words of wisdom you could bestow on the listeners, what might it be?
I want to go back. I just keep going back to with kids that are inspired to read and create their own stories. I really tell them to is to take themselves serious. If you've got a really good idea, think about it, flesh it out. Take it step by step, and don't skip steps. There are no shortcuts. Don't try to rush your way through it. Make it a passion. Make it something that this is something that is worthwhile of your time. It's worthwhile of your energy, and take it slow. Script it out. Do whatever it takes. Spend a little bit of time on it every single day. Writing is like anything else. The more you do it, the better you will become. It is a lifelong endeavor, a lifelong journey that ultimately is, for me, it's certainly one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
Just an additional side note, too, that I wanted to share with you that I was waiting until the end of the show to share with you, actually. When you actually came to my school back when I was a kid, you were talking about like inspiring kids to write, all this kind of stuff. And I actually ended up writing a series that I called The Monster World. And I wrote 5 of them, actually. And they're probably only maybe like 10 pages or so. But like the whole concept of it was basically that this guy would go planet to planet and he would like explore and check out all these different monsters and stuff like that on these planets. And, some of them were like, Bigfoot and like cryptids and stuff. Another one was like aliens and like giant monsters and stuff like that. But I mean, just a little inspiration like that, man. I still have actually all 5 of them that I originally made sitting up in my closet. So one day I'll have to let my daughter read them. But yeah, just simple stuff like that, man. And it inspired me to write these books that I still have from back when I was in, I want to say like 3rd grade, I wrote those.
That is too cool. Thanks for sharing that. That is awesome. That's what I want. That is exactly what I That's exactly what I hope happens. I love to hear that. That is fantastic.
And for anybody that possibly wants to come and check out any of your books, they want to come and check out your store, they want to get a hold of you for any reason whatsoever, possibly even book you to possibly come to their school, where can everybody get a hold of you, and where can people find your books and you on the internet?
Yeah, very easy. It's just go to AmericanChillers.com. We've got a small staff there. All the books that are ordered through AmericanChillers.com are autographed by me. And if you need something personalized, there's a comment section on there. I do that quite a bit. If you got a birthday for somebody and you want a personalized note for somebody, I did that today, as a matter of fact. But AmericanChillers.com is the perfect place to go. And find American Chillers on Facebook as well. I stay pretty active on there too.
Man, I really appreciate you making the time to come on today. I'm really glad that we're able to do this. Hopefully it inspires another generation of writers, and hopefully it gives that last little push that a lot of adult writers might need. But I appreciate you making the time to come on today. It was a really great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully having another conversation with you on the show at some point.
Sounds great. My pleasure.
If any of you guys out there want to get a hold of me for any reason whatsoever, possibly being a guest on the show, possibly even sharing an experience or an encounter, or even just simply having a conversation with me, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is increaseofourealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of me through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones I'm the most active on, or you guys can contact me through the submission form, which is available on the link tree, and that one will go directly to my email, or you guys can also call in or text the hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys have some free time, don't forget to go and check out the awesome friends of the show, I Know SQUATCH, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Crypto Theology, and Big Ape Threads, and our friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More information on those are available, of course, down in the show description. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available on the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. I'm Dr. D's taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities,